Okay, you guys can start it, Corinne.
Sure.
Now you can start it. Yeah.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, friends at home and abroad, welcome to Silicon Valley Leadership Community. SVLC was created in 2019 by 4 executives from top technology companies. We are currently one of the world's fastest growing leadership communities with hundreds of leaders, including distinguished executives and managers, university professors, MBAs from top business schools, venture capitalists, and entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. We have thousands of selected members with the mission and commitment to help leaders grow. Here are some capture of our previous speakers and events. We had leaders from Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, Tesla, and Hewlett Packard to share their perspectives. We had attracted hundreds and thousands of participants from these events and received very positive feedback. Before we start, allow me to introduce the co-host of today's forum. FlagDream, your journey to your dream company starts here. Relying on their strong resources, networks, and mentor teams throughout Silicon Valley and Wall Street, FlagDream provides career development, consulting, and vocational skill training services for young talents. Each year, they send thousands of trainees to top companies in various industries in Silicon Valley and around the world. Today, SVLC is hosting our 5th session of executive conversation, titled as Trust the Technology, Follow Time Speed. We are greatly honored to have invited 5 distinguished guests to join our talk today and share their unique perspectives of this rapidly changing world. They are William Liu, Head of Mobile Engineering at Quibi. William was Director of Engineering at Tinder and has work experience at Yahoo. Brian Lee, Director of Engineering at LinkedIn. Brian was previously Director of Engineering at Tinder and has work experience at Yahoo, News Digest, and Weather. Mary Yang, Director of Product at LinkedIn. Mary was former Chief Product Officer at Smil and had co-founded the US incubator of Renren. Tim Down, Director of Product at 23andMe. Tim graduated from Kellogg School of Management with his MBA. And lastly, our moderator of the day, Caroline Bao. Caroline is an MBA program faculty member at Rice University and also product and marketing consultant for QuickBooks and Intuit. Caroline used to work for Facebook. Now, let's start our talk today. Caroline, you have the mic.
Thank you, Corinne. Everyone, so glad to be here. We are going to be discussing how this pandemic has changed our lives this particular year. 2020 has been a very unique year, to say the least. In fact, some friends are joking if the things go the way how it is, we may have asteroid hitting us by December. Who knows? So, but keep it real. What we're going to discuss today is we have the privilege to have the 4 directors here to share their perspective, particularly from a people manager's perspective about how they are managing the new normal in terms of working, in terms of professional career growth, and their companies handling of all the crises that we're seeing. So the very first, I would love for each of our speakers to give us a brief introduction in your own words about you, your background, what took you to where you are today. If you guys don't mind, I'd love for Mary to go first.
Well, thank you, Caroline. Great to be here on the panel with everyone. I'm really excited to discuss with all of you on the topic. So I'm currently the Director of Product at LinkedIn, which I joined in January this year. And before that, I spent around 5 years' time at Smule, which is a music creation platform that has over 50 million monthly active users. And we do have members from all around the globe. And over there at Smule, I was the Chief Product Officer and managed the product design and engineering teams during different times. Before that, I co-founded the US incubator for Renren and launched 2 international products for the business, which both led to acquisitions. Before that, I was at Stanford in the Management Science and Engineering program, which was designed for folks with engineering background to learn more about management. And in college, I was in biomedical engineering at Tsinghua University. So I feel pretty lucky to have been witnessing a lot of changes in the Bay Area on innovation that has been happening over here, and also having the opportunity in managing very diverse teams covering like product engineering and design.
Thank you, Mary. And gentlemen, shall we go alphabetically? Brian, would you?
Yeah, sure. I'm super excited to be here. My name is Brian. I am a software engineer. I'm currently the director of engineering at LinkedIn, supporting a team that builds the job seeker experience to help people land their next jobs. Before coming to LinkedIn, I was at Tinder, spent 2.5 years there helping people to find love. And the next logical thing for me to do after finding people love is also help them to find a job to support their loved ones. So here I am at LinkedIn. I still tinker with coding quite a bit, and most recently I've been messing with JavaScript quite a bit.
Thank you. Tim?
Hi guys, my name is Tim. I'm glad to be here. I am currently the head of growth at 23andMe, which is a personal genetics company. My background is product. I've been doing it for 2 decades now. And at 23andMe, our focus is really on monetization and retention. My background is mostly direct-to-consumer, so that has run the gamut from health tech to media. So I was actually a director of product at Rhapsody in a prior career prior to 23andMe. Rhapsody was actually the first streaming music service to go live about a decade ago, around the time when Apple was selling a lot of music downloads and before Spotify came stateside. I love getting involved in industries that are actually just at their inception before they've gone mainstream. And I think we've managed to push 23andMe into the mainstream and enjoy actually seeing it impact people's lives.
Thank you. Will?
Thanks, Caroline. Happy to join this panel and discussing the issues going around the world. My name is Will. I'm currently the head of mobile engineering at Quibi. We are a brand new video platform that just launched in April with high quality content that you can watch in 10 minutes or less. Prior to Quibi, I was the director of engineering at Tinder for about 2.5 years, same as Brian. Again, my passion there was just a huge user-focused company, which takes the user experience as a high priority. Prior to that, I was at Yahoo working on some products that I was highly passionate about, including Yahoo Finance, which finance was my concentration in business school. So that's an obvious thing. And also fantasy sports. I'm a huge fantasy sports player. So doing that job was basically like going to play every day. Prior to that, I was in a totally different world at Lockheed Martin doing embedded systems. It is not user facing. You don't have millions of users. You probably have a dozen or a few highly specialized people who know how to use the equipment. So it was a big switch for me to switch from an embedded software world to a mobile world. But ever since this thing called a smartphone came out, I knew that's where I wanted to be, because that's where all the excitement was. For that, I grew up in New York, went to State University prior to coming out to Silicon Valley for 18 years before moving out to LA.
Thank you. Will, I share some experience with you. I used to work at Yahoo as well. I was with Yahoo for about 5 years, from 2004 to 2009. Was managing primarily advertising products on the product marketing front. So segue briefly to introduce my background. Besides Yahoo, I also led all channel marketing at Visa, in particular in charge of Visa USA's social media center of excellence, and as well as its corporate website. And then after that, I was leading a company called Bright Edge Technologies. It's an enterprise SEO software. I was the head of product marketing there. But my passion really still is within the advertising world, since I grew up in the advertising side. So when Facebook opportunity came, I joined Facebook to lead its advertising measurement product marketing team globally. So that was really fun. increasingly I realize all this knowledge really should be kind of codified and disseminated in a more scalable way. My other connection in this area, Mary, is I was invited by Tsinghua to teach at Tsinghua's accelerator called X Lab back in 2016. So I had the privilege of visiting Tsinghua campus and stay there for a few nights. And now here I am. I'm very glad to be here having today's conversation with you all. So you all have given us a little bit background about your individual career path, and I found that was very interesting, where you may have had a little bit more finance education, such as finance and MBA, such as well. But all of you seem to have been much more technology savvy from your original kind of educational training. In this, as you see sort of 2020 unfolding, and specifically from a technology standpoint, how are you observing your company are kind of handling this particular year with all the changes? If you could share with us a little bit.
Right. I guess you're referring to like mostly probably the COVID situation and
Yeah.
the home situation.
Mhm.
And I would say that because I was a SMUL, and in the last few years in the Silicon Valley, it has been really challenging for small, medium businesses to compete with the big ones. Like we know what the big ones are for engineering resource. So therefore, like 7 out of 10 like tech businesses you speak to, they probably have distributed workforce and offices in different places. And with COVID, I would say the distributed workforce type of like pattern is being like expedited, really. And more people are actually adopting to this, whether they actually want it or not. And I guess for the handling of COVID, we can talk about it in two perspectives for LinkedIn. One is on the employee side, like the day-to-day operations, and the second is around like business decisions. And I can speak to the product decisions, and Brian may speak more to the, probably can speak more about the engineering decisions. So for the employee side, because like LinkedIn's culture is really a lot about compassionate management. So we were actually one of the first companies in the Bay Area that like recommended people to work from home. And from there, we also like had a lot of like more flexible like time and like new guidelines for managers to really help us all better manage the situation. As employees, really, they have different situations to deal with, whether they're like single, like living alone, or that they're parents and they have like kids who have to stay home now because of the COVID situation. So we can't very much generalize the solution, but definitely having more compassion has been the general guidelines that we have around like how do we best support our teams at this time. And as for business decisions, we didn't want to disrupt the business too much, but we did also evaluate our priorities, whether they still made sense at this particular time, and what are some other things that we can really do to better serve the professional space at this time. And we know that there has been, unfortunately, a lot of job losses, like across the globe, in the US and in China. It was very unfortunate situations. So we actually sped up some projects, particularly towards this theme and many others that are really helping people during the COVID time, including very recently on the profile tab, you can see the open to indicate that you want to hire people or that you want to be hired. So those are the two aspects I want to cover for LinkedIn.
We'll expand more into that. Brian, do you want to share a little bit more about your observation of how the company is kind of handling the pandemic?
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would like to add is that I think no economy or company has really ever seen anything like the COVID-19. And so I think we're all experiencing this really differently. Some may have seen their business like decimated overnight. Others are experiencing exponential growth. And so everyone else is, really somewhere in between and determining how to best manage their business for the short term and also for the long term. LinkedIn moved to a remote work model like pretty swiftly in early March, and supporting a workforce of 16,000 plus employees fully remote at this scale is very new. And so we're still trying to navigate from that. So we went from a mostly centralized workforce in a set of offices around the globe to more of a temporarily remote one.
So I would like to add a little bit about how Quibi was handling the pandemic from the perspective that we actually launched our product during the pandemic. So it's not just a continuation service, but it's something brand new. And from the very beginning, Quibi was built on the idea that we're all going to be in the office to encourage collaboration. It's easy for people to just grab a room, go on the whiteboard, and start ideating and figuring things out. Even late last year, we were already thinking about how do we plan for war rooms to support launch. Have a big space where everybody can get in. We have our vendors all situated where we're going to have some people come in the office, work with us during launch week so we can make sure that we have a successful launch. Once we got word that, hey, there may be a work from home situation, those plans kind of all changed. Now we're starting thinking, all right, if this work from home is for real, how do we deal with this? How do we actually support a launch when we're not in this war room? I think one of the things that helped us a lot is we actually prepared and did dry runs ahead of time. Even when we're in the office, we decided that we're going to try to support a dry run launch from our desk and not from a single room. So everybody would be essentially calling in from home. So that actually helped us prepare for launch. Of course, once we actually got word and this was becoming real and work from home is now the first option instead of a potential backup, we had to do a little more preparation, get used to the fact, and try to make sure that we all have what we need from home to support it. It actually turned out decently well. I think one of the things that I want to call out as a pro is if any of you have been through war rooms before, you'll know that it's a big conference room, a bunch of people in there, you bring your monitors, everybody's in a tight space. It's probably pretty hard to work on normal stuff when you're in a war room. And not everybody can join, right? Only a certain amount of people. So what we thought one of the big pluses for the Zoom war room is that more people can actually join in, call in, and have the Zoom room in the background and listen in and participate without actually physically having to be there. So it actually opened up the war room to a lot more people. And over the week when we were launching, we basically had 24-hour shifts. People can just call in whenever they want, put it in the background, even if they're doing something else and they have the comfort of their home or the home office work. So the preparation and the work from home, we actually thought, even though it was difficult, it actually helped us get more people involved in the launch. So that was definitely a plus from my perspective of going through launch with COVID. And kind of like what Mary said, there's a bunch of other things that we need to deal with, such as family situations. You have parents with kids, especially if you're just parents and kids in the household without grandparents or other relatives to help out. It's a very different situation when you need to take care of your kids now every day and they don't have school to go to that occupies them for most of the day. So there's definitely challenges throughout the way that are new to this whole COVID situation. But like most things, there's positive things that come out of it and negative things that we now need to learn to deal with.
Did the launch meet the original kind of estimated projection in terms of numbers and other things?
I don't want to go into too much of the details because that's for our PR department. But I will say that our launch was better than we expected from a technical perspective. We had no issues. As you guys know, in the technology world, you always prepare for the worst. We prepared to do hot fixes for Apple. We prepared to do last minute hot fixes for the Play Store. And actually, we didn't have to do anything. The launch was perfectly smooth. The app went well. The communication was good. After the first day, we basically started relaxing a little bit more, even though we were prepared for a week, because it's just the product, the technology, what we deliver out there was just well enough that we can relax a little bit earlier than we expected. So we're happy about that part.
That's awesome. Tim, from your perspective, 23andMe is a little bit more B2C. Is that true? So how is 23andMe dealing with the pandemic and the COVID situation?
Well, we did see a slight drop in kit sales probably around mid-March or so. And of course, when we saw that, we started looking at the numbers and projecting how bad could this actually get. It turns out that you know, again, I think it's early days. We don't quite know how this is going to play out, but our initial read on it seems to be that people were pausing on purchasing more out of economic anxiety than because their wallets had actually been hit. Now, that's not to diminish, of course, the 40 million people who are unemployed. But for the folks who are in the market for 23andMe kids, I think there was just a pause there to kind of assess how bad this was going to get. And hopefully, as yesterday's numbers, I think it was yesterday or the day before that, suggest, right, this may be a long comeback, but at least we're starting to rebound potentially on the employment numbers.
Is this something that the company kind of thought about in terms of the type of spending? Because some of the spending is sort of must do, like the groceries and others. While 23andMe is a little bit of the discretionary expenses. Did you guys have to revise your like annual projection and other things?
Certainly, we have been looking at what our projections would be for our fiscal year. It's a little inaccurate to say that it's more discretionary in the sense that for those folks who don't know, 23andMe actually has two components to it. One is the ancestry service, where customers can discover more about their ancestors as well as people whom they're connected to or related to within a database. The other part, which has always been a part of the mission of the company, is in healthcare, right? And essentially using people's genetics to disclose to them the risk that they may have on health. Of course, health is much more complex than your genetics, but genetics can play a pretty large component on it for certain diseases. And that part we believe is actually keeping us, in people's top of mind right now, because as they think about going forward, whether coronavirus is here for another 2 years or 5 years or so, the more proactive people are with respect to their health, the better. And 23andMe plays right into that prevention angle.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. In fact, a little bit of my current company, I'm providing consulting to Intuit right now, and Intuit actually provides. This is the B2B side. It's the QuickBooks accounting software. The moment when the COVID situation becomes really kind of escalated, we started looking into our marketing expenses, and as you probably would have guessed, the paid media got slashed quite a bit because we wanted to, I think a lot of companies temporarily went through a little bit of the revised of the budget and the projection just to see what is the core we have to protect. And then gradually a month or so later, we started to loosen up a little bit of our paid media, our some of the marketing campaigns as well.
Yeah, I attended a couple of webinars I think this was in late March or early April, which was tracking B2C trends in this particular area. And as you might imagine, cost per impressions were actually going down because a lot of the big players were pulling out of bidding for ads, et cetera. So the ability to kind of buy ads was a little bit was heightened in the sense that smaller companies could actually afford to participate in that. The problem was that when people were clicking, they were largely just browsing. There were a lot of people who were clicking and looking at the various products that were out there, but the conversion rates were dropping because they were browsing and like looking at things, but not necessarily following through on the actual purchase. I haven't checked in on the numbers. I suspect that has changed a little bit, but you're right. There certainly was an effect in the first couple of weeks right after this hit.
Yeah, and I forgot to ask our LinkedIn directors, did LinkedIn see an increase of online activities since it is a place people are now proactively networking and I would imagine, come for looking for opportunity to build up their personal brands. I've seen definitely a lot of the quite compassionate notes about how an employee may have been laid off and the entire clan of those employees are like kind of buddying up and things like that.
We saw some fluctuations at the very beginning when it first hit. So when the shelter in place was first announced, we did some hit on the overall activities, as some other platforms also see initially. It's kind of people were just basically figuring out what to do with their new life routines. But starting from there, we definitely started seeing metrics recovering, and in some areas actually exceeding pre-COVID baselines, kind of because some of the channels for you to connect offline are not there anymore. And especially some business lines that we saw has exponential growth, included LinkedIn Learning, because people are now having more free time if they don't have to commute generally. And a lot of, like, I wouldn't say for everyone, but there are definitely like a group of people who has more free time now, and they're taking this opportunity to learn more new things. And we saw LinkedIn Learning actually grew by over 150% in the previous months. And also for on the Messenger side, we saw more coworkers actually reaching out to each other to potentially to support each other. So generally, I would say a lot of new activities. And in China specifically, we actually saw almost like double engagement growth compared to pre-COVID like baselines.
Wow. Yeah, this is very interesting. Sometimes opportunities really come from the most in a very unexpected way. And I want to switch gear really briefly around sort of as people manager, how do you see that the way how you lead has changed? Did you have any specific areas or programs or examples that you think is really different this year compared to other years?
Sorry, Mary, go ahead.
Oh, I wasn't going to say.
Oh,
Go
okay,
ahead,
I thought
please.
you. I would say there's a lot more online conversations now instead of more in-person conversations. I'm the type of person that likes to just walk up to somebody's desk and discuss things on the spot, or if I have questions, just grab a room and do that. Obviously, we can't do that today, so there's a lot of slack. But when you're texting, there's a lot of nonverbal communication that gets lost in Slack messages. So there's still a lot of times where I end up just going, I'm just going to call you or do a Zoom call and just work things out that way. It just seems to be easier. But I do feel like the conversation part of managing people and leading changes a little bit that way. And also the other thing is you have to be more aware of your report's personal situations. Before, it's kind of easy to assume at the office, everybody's in the work mentality, everybody's there and fully focused on work. But in today's world, you have kids at home, you have other family members that may be sharing a space or things like that. So you have to be a little bit more conscious about how each individual's home situations may be affecting their work. I've had people where they need more time to provide daycare for their kids or watch kids themselves. So they're obviously going to be a little bit less productive than they normally would. It's not their fault. It's just something that we're all in there together and we got to work through. So things like that now you have to realize managing people's times, managing productivity is a little bit different than just purely assuming that, normal business hours is where everybody's actually working.
Has there, if you don't mind, I have a follow-up question. Has there been times where either the person well or you, depending, I guess, sorry, let me remove that condition, but has there been any time that you kind of not quite sure if you're getting the most accurate employees sort of report on their status?
Well, you kind of have to trust the guys that you hired. I mean, that's one of the criteria. If you hire them, you should trust them. And if you don't trust them, you probably shouldn't hire them from the start. That's not to say that you won't have people that don't meet your expectations. That does happen. But I don't think just because of this pandemic moment that you start trusting your guys less. In fact, that you have to actually trust them more and just go by blind faith because you don't see them every day in the office. You have to give everybody the benefit of the doubt that they're all trying to do their best. They're all trying to do their work. I don't think any of the guys that we hired are taking advantage of the situation. I think they're all putting forth their best effort. But I do know for some people, the productivity dropped a little bit because of family situations or whatnot. And you have to kind of be understanding of that is life, that happens. We all have problems, things come up. So there's just a little bit of different of just understanding situations rather than not trusting that they're doing their best and they're not trying to cheat the system.
Yeah, it's really important to make sure there is both a benefit of the doubt, but also an existing trust that has been built up. And our other panelists, any thoughts on from your perspective?
Yeah, and I think Will touched on building connection with your employees, and one of my personal mantras as a manager is managing with compassion. I think Mary also touched a little bit on this. Is to try to put yourself in your employee's shoes and try to go through in your mind what they have to go through and understand their strengths and weaknesses. And when something doesn't go according to plan, instead of trying to take command of the situation and insert yourself, we need to pause and listen to and really seek to understand what their challenges are, especially with everything that's going on, right? This has worked really well for me as a manager. And I think in these hard times, this is even more critical. One of the challenge and we had to adapt to is how we recognize people. As Will mentioned, when you're in a centralized and physical team before the pandemic, there's a lot of opportunities to check in on your team and see how they're doing and recognize people for doing a good job. The lunches, hallway conversations, quick huddles that you can do around the office. Those are the great venues. You can give people high fives and say good jobs. But we can't really rely on those really simple daily interactions anymore. So we have to be a little bit more systematic about this. And one thing we've adapted was in our staff meetings, we have our team members give kudos and call outs to to other team members. But this is actually like really hard work because you want the call outs to be specific and you want it to be very authentic and genuine. So we do have to spend a lot of time, making sure that we provide like really specific examples in the call outs.
Right, I'd like to echo that. And like before echoing that, I also want to point out that like another symptom that we're seeing is that people are getting really tired of Zoom meetings all in all, because there are a lot of studies you can like find resources online, right? And that why that is the case, because we all know that having your video camera on is going to be better, but there's internet latency, and you will always try to like make the best of yourself in front of a camera, because now everyone is in the spotlight right now. So there's definitely a lot of training for everyone, including us and all our team members, like our managers. They're all going through this. So one other thing we've been trying to do is like block off times where we're not going to have meetings. For instance, like lunchtime, the lunch hours, right? So people can have a little bit of like rest in between and don't have to have back-to-back meetings all the way through. And during meetings, we also did things similar to what Brian's staff meeting did, was to do those call outs. And also because we found that people really don't have enough time to have a very long meeting, and there's a lot to cover for us in staff meetings. So we've been doing more is actually have people do some pre-fill so that they can be flexible. So we have a template for them to like fill out if they want to, because this is like optional, right? If you don't have anything to say, then it's okay to leave it out. But there are things people want to call out for what went well, what didn't go well, and like what they need help on. And also we have some other couple of like fun sections for people to share like fun read or what's happening outside of our team, because there's basically fewer hallway conversations that are happening naturally. So it's kind of easy for people to get isolated and then go into the topic for discussions. And at the beginning of the meeting, we will try to give people some pre-read time so that they consume the things that are just like easy to read or like updates, things like that. And then we can spend the time more focused on like live discussions where people can chime in on. So we found this as a pretty productive and effective way of driving conversations and also giving people space to express their thoughts.
Yeah, I'll second that on the kind of the pre-fills and the efficiency. We found it very effective particularly for team meetings, to basically have a running Google Doc, and folks will basically throw things in there throughout the course of the week, things that they want to talk about. Sometimes the list is short, sometimes it's long, sometimes it's not work related, as in the case right now, where people kind of just want to talk about a particular issue. And I think that's helpful. It means that people don't get taken by surprise in these meetings, but it also keeps the meeting very efficient. I personally don't have like a pro Zoom account. So even though my team meeting is an hour long, we've actually been managing to get it done before that 40-minute, the deadline ticks in there. So I think it's helped the teams become a lot more efficient. One other thing to echo the kind of the trust and compassion components that we've been talking about is also realizing that different people handle what we're going through differently, right? So I have folks who are very resilient and like, oh, it's no big thing. We're just basically we're working now at home when we used to be working at the office. Whereas other people, kind of referring to like the social glue that Brian's talking about, like that's a real thing. And people, I think a lot of people get energy from that and they actually work better because of it. And so that part has been missing, obviously, especially if you're living alone, right? You no longer have that element to keep you going and to keep your energy up. So trying to find a way to replicate that remotely, I think is a challenge for our team. There are ways to do it. They're not obviously as effective as being in the same room as folks, but that's kind of the gap that we're trying to fill right now.
That's very interesting. Do you guys could you guys expand a little bit about the programs you do to emulate, to replicate that social connection you were talking about? I know some companies are doing virtual happy hours with real beer that everybody's holding in hand, or some companies, like in ours, we actually created a social chat for the folks who work in the same department. We literally call it the chat Slack channel. What are some other programs you have seen that you thought is cool or interesting, or it's been working?
Right. So for like my team, the most fun thing I said would we actually played the kind of the online social games by Jackbox TV. So they have some drawing and trivia games which are extremely good for team building. So we all enjoy doing it. So you can like Google for Jackbox and look for those.
I know some of the teams that are under me, they still hold team lunches. So even though they're not physically at the same place, they all set together a time like, let's meet at noon and we'll all have our lunch with Zoom meeting on. So some people are still trying to get, I know there are others who still try to meet up in a socially safe way, just so they can see each other and hang out and talk. So I think there's still groups within the group, so they're trying to find ways to meet up and get a little bit of just face-to-face interaction or just more social interactions. Like you were saying, we do have happy hours at the end of the day. It's obviously happy hour via Zoom is a little bit different than happy hour in real life. You could probably only have one real conversation going on, whereas in happy hour in real life, you could have 4, 5, 6 different conversations going. But people are trying. I know one of my leads always have a check-in on just how people are doing from working from home. So there's cases where they discuss issues that they're facing and whatnot. I know as a company, Quibi is actually helping people get out there and try to be a little bit normal. So one of the programs we have, we call Be Well. We actually provide some reimbursement for you to have an exercise equipment that you want to buy for your place, so you can still work out, because obviously gyms are closed. You're not walking to the office. For most people, it's walking from one room to another, which is their bedroom to their office. Sometimes it's even the same room. So having an exercise equipment kind of helps. So the company also is trying to do things like that, and also providing, if you're going to go buy a stand-up desk to kind of be like the office where we all stand up desk, they'll reimburse you for that. So Quibi as a company is trying to help you have some resemblance of normal life instead of just being at home all day.
Totally. Yeah. And I want to be conscious of time. I know that there's several questions coming from our audience already. I'd love to touch on a couple of them. One question that's interesting is the audience mentioned that they have noticed that Glassdoor laid off about 300 people. But in contrast, LinkedIn has seen tremendous growth, especially in LinkedIn Learning. What are some thoughts you may have, and totally okay if you feel like this is a little bit sensitive, you don't want to comment, but audience has asked this question.
Right. So we have to recognize that LinkedIn is kind of an ecosystem, right? I would guess that most of the audience over here might be more familiar with the social network part of LinkedIn, which is the site, the app that you use, right, where you can like network and do these other things, which are the primary use case that you have on LinkedIn today. But LinkedIn is also a pretty robust ecosystem that provides also a couple of other enterprise business lines, including like learning. So you have the premium users, and we also sell it to enterprises. And we also have like LinkedIn Talent Solution, which is the sector that Brian is leading and some of the engineering efforts on. We also have LinkedIn Marketing Solution that is on ads. And as you can see, the spending in the ads market space, right, it's not hard to imagine how that business has been like performing recently. And we also have LinkedIn Sales Solution, and there we actually saw like really a lot of growth in the interest because a lot of the salespeople are losing their traditional like physical channels or like offline channels where they could contact each other. So overall, because it has its own ecosystem, and although there might be fluctuations in different pieces of the business, it's altogether is generally a little bit more robust than a business that has only one area of focus.
Yeah, thank you. There's another question for Tim. The question was, has 23andMe in any way involved with other pharmaceutical companies to develop a medicine or vaccine for COVID-19?
So I can't talk too much about that. The one piece that is public and that you may have seen I think it was about a month ago, is that we actually recruited our existing customers with 10 million customers to fill out surveys about their experience, if any, with COVID-19. And so, not surprisingly, some percentage of our database has been diagnosed with COVID and has even been hospitalized by it. I think the key question that's being asked here is whether or not there's a genetic component to COVID-19. I think you're seeing some of the press. There was a couple of articles that came out yesterday that suggest that type A blood actually is a higher risk factor for COVID-19. And that is a genetic component to it, right, as well. So still early days, I believe. And generally, 23andMe doesn't go as downstream into drug development, like in actually marketing drugs on the market itself. But in terms of like identifying correlation between genotypes and the expression of that, the kind of the susceptibility to COVID-19, that's what we're starting to explore.
Yeah, very interesting. I'd be very curious. I actually will go subscribe to your company's blogs. That sounds like very useful information. The past couple of days, we took the kids camping, and out of my 3 kids, 2 of them got bitten a lot by mosquitoes. And we were just saying like maybe blood type affects how likely you are to be bitten by mosquitoes.
Yeah, if it's not blood type, and maybe it's like the way that mosquitoes can detect your scent, and like maybe how you're emitting that scent, I think is a part of it as well.
I know, that'll be so interesting. Fascinating industry. I know there's one other thing, just switching gear real briefly too, is managing up, because we all know managing employee, as we just discussed, it's something that you can control to a good extent. But now with working from home, managing up is almost a different ball game. What are your thoughts or experience or observations from that regard?
I would say actually like whichever direction you were trying to manage is kind of in a similar situation right now. They actually have similar sorts of challenges in that whether it is like with your peers or with your team or with your manager, like you don't really have the physical space or the hallway conversations anymore. And also like almost always your manager may be exposed to like more challenges than you would have generally. So I would say this is also a time to be like compassionate and empathetic towards them as well. Obviously be transparent, right? If you have like challenges you're facing, definitely be like open and transparent about it and make them aware of it. And also in that they probably also have a lot of meetings going on. So like writing some sort of summaries where it's easier for them to digest and calling out the things that would need most of their attention and also properly discuss the priorities and being able to align on things earlier. I said are generally things that would like help them and would also help in other types of like professional relationships that you have in the company.
Yeah, I would echo that. If you go back to kind of the 2 things we talked about with respect to managing your own teams, compassion and trust, perhaps it's hard to control a manager's compassion for you, but you can absolutely control the amount of trust that they have in you, right? So the sort of the things that Mary talked about, if you're being more transparent, if you're proactively pushing information to them as opposed to requiring them to kind of check in on you, I think those are the proper ways to do it. We have also doubled down, especially in the last couple of months, of having meetings where it essentially decentralizes decision making so that it doesn't require you all to be in the same room. They know that a core team exists for a particular initiative and that this team meets weekly and that they will receive notes from this after the meeting is done. And if there are any decisions that need to be escalated to them, those will be escalated on a weekly basis as well. So having things that are set up that facilitate trust among your managers, I think is really important.
Yeah. And one thing I like to add is because of how quickly things are changing and the dynamics are changing that's introduced by COVID-19, the team has to be also a lot more agile. So as a result, there are just more variables in the planning process and also more changes in execution as well, which makes setting expectation really difficult. So I think even though when we have trust between the managers, I think over communication is still the key here. Not so much about, really not having the trust, but, it's about just communicating your statuses effectively and try to consolidate all the communication in a single source of truth, right? Because there's so many meetings going on. And that way we can really minimize the communication and really set the right expectations.
Yeah, and I agree with everything everybody else has said. I kind of want to add also have extra patience. I know it's for me too, where in the office, it's easy to see that you're in a conversation. So you can wait and kind of find them afterwards. But in this environment where everybody's on Slack or whatever messaging system, you don't know that they're in another conversation or 3 or 4 or 5. Just like for myself, sometimes I have 6 people Slacking me at the same time. I obviously can't answer everybody. So when you're dealing with whether your direct reports or your manager, have some patience. They may not get back to you right away because they're probably in 5, 6 other conversations. So you just kind of have to learn to deal with time a little bit differently.
Yeah, that's so true. I do also concur sometimes if I Slack someone and I don't hear back, say in a normal turnaround, I have to admit, sometimes, especially if you didn't know that person well, like this is a new legal person I'm working with, and if they don't respond, I'll be like, oh crap, did I just got shut down? This fear does come. So that's a good piece of advice. And I wanted to also bring up another question from the audience. This question is about your future thoughts, the sort of foresights you have in terms of the future industry, both your own industry as well as maybe other industry that will become booming as a result of everything that's happening this year. Any thoughts around prediction, like from an overall macro level?
So I guess I would say that, at least from my perspective, we're based on going to the office, working from the office. I know a lot of companies do that. There are some places, even when I was at Tinder, there was a reluctance about people who work remotely. I think after all of this, there's probably a lot of proof that working from remotely is actually not as bad as people feared. So I'd imagine there's going to be a lot more working from home. And I think we already see evidence of that, where Facebook announced you can work from anywhere that you want. So I imagine a lot more companies will kind of follow suit and it says, all right, we don't require everybody to work from the office. You guys can pick your location and work remotely. And I think video conferencing is only going to get better. I think one of the problems with working from home is video conferencing technology. Zoom has worked out decently well. Definitely come a long way since what I remember when I was doing video conferencing 3-4 years ago, where there's a huge lag. When you're speaking, there's a gap and it's just difficult because you don't know when to start, when to stop. So I think that's going to progress really fast. For us specifically, we're built on this idea of providing entertainment for people on the go in the moments where you're waiting in line for Starbucks, where you're waiting in line for your bus. So that'd be interesting to see that. How does work from home, how does this new environment actually turn out? I don't know the answer, but that's going to be an interesting way to see how this world changes after COVID is over.
Yeah, I'd agree to Will. And I said earlier, this kind of like more distributed thing is already a lot of the small, something that a lot of the small medium businesses more had to take instead of a more like centralized manner, because it just like housing price in the Bay Area has been increasing, right? So is it in like Beijing and Shanghai. So I think this also reminds people definitely that there is a way to work like remotely, and there are potentially benefits in doing so as well, because like I don't want to like forecast how soon we can get back to the office, but there will certainly be people who don't feel so comfortable going back to office, and then from there, and also from the examples set by the couple of tech giants here in the Bay Area, there's probably going to be more flexibility overall and more decentralization from the areas where like housing price has been like peaking in the past few years, right? And no matter what, I think this is going to be a trend. And therefore, as like professionals in the tech industry, this is always something for us to like another skill set for us to master it. It's kind of like how to work collaboratively still with people who are remote. What are like ways to do it more productively? And sometimes potentially not even in the same time zone. It could be across multiple time zones as well. So how do we make sure that our work process and our decision-making process is actually scalable, right? It's something I think is always good to learn.
Remoteness is obviously something that's going to impact the health and wellness sector, which I include 23andMe as part of. Clearly, telemedicine, telehealth have accelerated exponentially in the past several months. American Well, I think, just mentioned yesterday that they're planning to go public sometime later this fall. So there's a ton of investment going into this industry, and it will transform the way that patients think about, and I shouldn't even use the term patients, it's actually everyday people. Patients implies that you're sick, right? Whereas most of us are taking care of our health before we get sick. And certainly that's the sweet spot where 23andMe sees itself in the prevention area. When I say health and wellness, I refer to people actually taking care of, their fitness, their exercise, nutrition. And there are in fact already telehealth options in those areas, whether it's nutrition, coaching, yoga, Peloton, if you think about it, is sort of like a remote sort of fitness service. And so there's going to be absolutely an acceleration in this particular area. And I think the way that people think about the relationship with the physician will also change. I think the forward-looking providers will try to get ahead of that and perhaps have like quarterly check-ins or semi-annual check-ins with their patients, as opposed to just seeing you like, okay, when your child has a cough or whatever it may be. But it's already starting to trickle through the industry.
Yeah, and I think everyone touched upon remote and centralized versus decentralized. So I just add this one thing, and a lot of decision making today is, like I mentioned earlier, is happening synchronously in real time, but there will be a lot of decisions that need to happen asynchronously. For example, let's say job interview, right? Right now, it's almost always real time, where you have either in person or video chat, but you could also have a way of doing the interviews asynchronously, right? You can ask a question, get an answer in a different time, especially when we have this distributed workforce that are in different time zones. It's going to get harder and harder for that to happen, right? So we're going to have to figure out many different ways of doing things in a much more asynchronous manner.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just add another observation is how US consumer compared to the rest of the world were much more brick and mortar type of consumers by percentage. This pandemic and the work from home really accelerated that behavior. So e-commerce, online grocery delivery, anything that used to resist some of the sort of trend is changing. Electronic payments, as well as the telehealth, like Tim mentioned, just to kind of round up on some of the industry observation. We also, I think one of the things we also talk about was about identity, with having to balance work and life, with having to, in a way, as someone joke about on Facebook, hey, I'm rediscovering my husband. He's actually those kind of guy that ask, are you okay? How are you guys thinking? What are some thoughts come to you when you think about sort of maintaining your identity, all kinds of identities in this new normal?
Well, like I was pretty shocked recently to say that I can also do like haircut for my husband. That's a new piece of discovery, and it sounds like it's actually pretty common nowadays, as it's still pretty a little like risky to go back to hair salons. But definitely, I would say that like whether for myself or for a lot of others, is that like we're having less commute time, we're spending more time with like family. Like at least for me, I actually appreciate the time I'm able to actually spend more with my husband, and also discovering new things that we can do together, like creatively, because we obviously would get bored sometimes as well. We don't have kids. So like for instance, we like one other thing we did was like we kind of like made our rectangular dining table a ping pong table, putting paper tissue box in like in the middle. So I would say that I appreciate this time where I can spend more time with him, with the family, and as well as because of like not having like commute time, and I also was able to spend more extra time in like helping others out who may need either like mentorship or support, or that they are actually having more challenges in their life and work. And I feel pretty lucky in that I personally don't have that much of challenge, maybe compared to those who like would have kids or have other challenges in their life. So overall, like it has been good so far for me.
Yeah, one thing I would say is the identities definitely are blending because we are staying home pretty much 24/7. We don't really get to go out very much. Our office literally, a few feet away from our beds. So you wake up and you pretty much go to work right away. And I remember just having gym shorts on for the longest time, just, from work and going straight to my gym, which is just, my one bench in the next room. So it has been really blending in quite a bit. And I remember my daughter has walked into one of my meetings one time, and it was a very heated conversation. I don't think my daughter's ever seen me in that kind of setting. So she was definitely a little bit shocked, and she kind of froze a little bit. But I would like to say, like, we should actually really embrace that. And in the beginning, when my daughter was handing me food or drinks when I'm in meetings, and I'm like, don't get into the screen, right? Like, stay off the screen. But more and more, I'm finding myself embracing more of that. And when my daughter comes by and hand me a drink, I grab her and actually have her say hello to my coworkers. I also find that that's a really good way of connecting with my coworkers as well. So I actually appreciate it.
Yeah, I kind of second what Brian said. With kids, it's kind of interesting. When you're at work before, you're away from them. I mean, they're at school and whatnot. You're away from them for probably a good 10 hours with commute time, even more sometimes. I actually like the moments now where my son just comes into my office and just says hi or visits me. Like those are actually good moments. So that's definitely something different than if I was in the office, that wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't see him until I come home. I don't get these moments. Sometimes even throughout the day, I might just walk downstairs and just visit them and say hi. So that's good. I do also agree that the identities are blending a little bit because you're always available. Your laptop is right there. And it almost feels like work and life is the same thing. There's been a couple of times where I was joking with people at work that it all just every day just kind of feels like the same day, blended all into one.
Groundhog Day, like all day, every day.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, I think if it wasn't for my kids not having his Zoom classes on the weekends, I may not know which day is the weekend. Every day feels the same. I just look at my calendar and go to meetings that my calendar tells me I got to go to. But it's definitely something that I've been doing a little bit more of trying to separate work and home and just life at home. Trying to spend more time with my kids and isolated and actually you're rediscovering a lot of things. I've been doing a lot of Lego building with my kids and discovered that's what he really enjoys. The past week he's been doing origami. I'm like, oh, I didn't know you were into that, but now we get to spend days just watching him fold paper. So there's definitely a lot of pros. And like Mary mentioned, you avoid that commute. So for me, it's not too bad, but I know for some people they travel over an hour each way. So that's 2.5 hours, 3 hours that they would get back every day, whether they're spending that time doing work or spending the time with their family. That's essentially you having 3 more hours every day. And that's significant. So there's something definitely positive coming out of the mix of home and work.
Yeah. Tim, any interesting observations or stories that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, it's largely the same here. I think the absence or the blurring of the identities is actually causing me to work longer hours. I'm not sure if you guys are actually doing this, but it's because usually you would leave the office at, let's say, 6:30 or something like that, and then you're back home and then you're like just in home mode. But I don't have that distinction anymore, right? So I'm actually putting in more hours, which is unfortunate. I try to put things down at night and then through the weekend, but I inevitably go back to it over the weekend. So that I think that's just something I need to get better at. The other part that I would say that is important is like the things that you ordinarily would have done only on the weekends. You should continue to do those sort of things. So if you're going to go, we went cherry picking, for instance, a couple of weeks ago, right? That's not something you would ordinarily do during the work week. Today we went to Sanborn County Park, which is down in Saratoga. Super nice place. Like that's not something I would ordinarily do. So now I can register that as like, oh yeah, that was a weekend activity that we did a couple of weeks ago. The other thing that Mary mentioned that I think it's been intriguing to me. I'm actually doing more networking now than before. It's almost like people no longer have the excuse to not meet up. Not that they were like averse to meeting up, but because you have to deal with schedules and all this other stuff. But now everybody's at home and is always available. So I have as many as 3 or 4 calls a week that are not related to 23andMe. They're either mentors, mentees, or companies that I'm advising, and it's just kind of fun to have a side thing that's going on outside of 23andMe.
It's funny. I almost feel like we need to, at this particular point now, publish your phone numbers at the bottom of your profile here.
You can find us all on LinkedIn.
Sorry, just kidding. One of the things that I also was super curious, you all as managers, what are some signals that you see that's maybe slightly different from individuals that are now currently thriving in this new working model? You know, in the past, if you know someone is working well or not well, you see it on their face, you know their inactions. As now we do work remotely. What do you look for in your folks to know someone is tracking well for their annual goals, someone is kind of not doing so well? Like, how are you evaluating? And do you have to adjust their annual goals in any way?
Right. At LinkedIn, the system might be slightly different in that we don't really have an annual like goal system in that way. We do have annual performance, but when we set our goals, usually it's either like 2 quarters or 1 quarter. And overall, like the evaluation, we actually paused performance review for some time because of the COVID situation, and different people had different challenges. So similar to some other tech companies, we also like paused it for some period of time. And overall, I would say the characteristics of the individuals that are like doing well are still similar from the traits that mostly similar from the traits before, right? And in this particular moment, I think it's like it's not to say that like it's basically everyone needs more patience and even more like be more compassionate towards one another. Because like as we all experience, right, like people may not respond immediately on Slack. They may have slightly different working hours and may need more flexibility. So I would say that having more like patience and understanding towards one another and be more empathetic is going to benefit any like individual at this time.
Yeah, I echo that. I don't think that we've been in this situation long enough to really identify any changing pattern just yet. And we definitely want to be cautious and mindful about the stress from that's caused by the pandemic, the shutdown, balancing between work and home life. I manage a team of managers, and my framework for recognizing people and tracking signals has largely remained the same. We try to be as data-driven as possible, using business metrics that the team delivers, along with engineering and productivity metrics, employee voice surveys, and just to calibrate between team members, utilize 360 feedback. So in that sense, it hasn't really changed all that much. But during this time, I do look for signals for great managers within my team, and such as being able to keep the team's well-being in check and balancing between delivering business results and putting people first. I think this is, I think as a manager, it's easy to always want to keep delivering business results. But I think in these times, we have to make sure that we put people first. So that balancing act is really important.
Yeah, I agree with that fact. I think, like Mary said, as far as the characteristics of who's successful, who's doing well, hasn't really changed too much. I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's the external factors that may affect that person's ability to actually deliver on those. And you just have to be compassionate, like Brian was saying, understanding that there's external factors, like if they're affected by COVID in any way in their personal or their extended families, or if they have children, things like that, it will take a toll on them, and they won't be as effective as they want to be or as they are able to be. But we're dealing with the situation. But I don't think there's too much changes regarding their personal characteristics and how they are to be successful.
One thing I might add, and this does depend on organization culture and size, is optics may matter more now, right? So if you're actually trying to push a project through, you generally want more people to be aware of how that thing is going or that project is moving, and that's harder to do, obviously, in a remote environment. So having forums for those folks to actually present those projects to a broader audience is becoming more important. And I see the more proactive folks actually volunteering to get in front of the company. We have a weekly Friday meeting in front of the entire company, so it's like 600 people or so, and you'll see folks actually volunteering for just like a 5-10 minute update. There is helpful. We have another weekly meeting every Tuesday morning with the engineering, product, and marketing directors, essentially. So that's like a smaller meeting, but still, it's kind of the folks who are in the inner circle of who should know and what will actually be acting on this information. So I've certainly seen folks stepping up and making sure that their message is clear and that they're being heard, so that when it comes time to ship that particular project, they're a bit more effective there.
Thank you guys for sharing. One thing that I was reminded of is also prioritization. At Facebook, one thing it's one of our mantra is to be always ruthlessly prioritizing. So I find, for example, myself have been very transparent, but at the same time, a little bit more strict in terms of the things that I take on, just because I know if you're not clear about what you're prioritizing, you may let people down further. I just wanted to add that particular point to everything you guys have said. We also received a question from the audience about, this is mainly for Mary and me. The question was, any advice we have for women in tech to advance their career in the Valley? And actually, I think it's probably not a question just for Mary and me. I'd welcome our panelists to all chime in. What are your thoughts? How should women think about advancing their career in the Valley? It doesn't have to be COVID related.
Right. This is the pretty general question, I would say. And the answers might not be the same for everyone, I would say, because each one has their personal characteristics. If you go test your personality, right, we would all get different results. Some people are more similar in personality to one another, and at different times we all may come across different set of challenges, whether it's externally or it's internally. You're having some self-doubts occasionally. I would say the first thing to do is to really understand yourself as to what you eventually value, right? Because different people have very different definition towards what does quote unquote success means, what does happiness mean, right? So being able to really find that kind of what is really important for you, find your own values, I think is a step to take for sure. And obviously at the beginning of your career, you might not have a lot of choices, just practically speaking, right? But still choosing a path where you want to devote more time on is going to be important. And second, I would say, since we don't have a general answer, So being able to actually find like peers and mentors you can talk to, like, and some people call it like your virtual board of directors, right? You can search for literally the words virtual board of directors and Google it, right? So this is a good way of helping you to answer some of the questions that you might have at different stages of your career, since there's not a general answer. And the general people that you may want to seek help for are some people who are like you, who share like pretty similar background as you do, like whether it is like the industry or the education background, or like they're female in your case, or like, and also find some other categories, like a smaller percentage, but still important people that are quite different from you, like male or like other people in like slightly different industries, like in slightly different like levels or skill set. So that you can have a balanced view and like discussions with them around the particular like problems that you have. And one other thing I would say is that like the times where we start to thinking more about this question about what I do with my career oftentimes happens when either we're lost or like we face a huge challenge. It's like, okay, I don't know what to do. And whether for myself or for some others I've seen is that I definitely did have times where I felt like, usually I would feel like I can't handle everything, right? Everything is in control. But there were times that got really tough for myself. And those moments would be actually different for like different people, like, because different people value different things, right? What matters for me may not matter for you. What matters for you may not matter for another person. So when you face such kind of challenges, don't only like stick to just yourself and like keep on blaming yourself in such kind of situations, but really try to reach out and like be able to share your experience with like whether peers or mentors that you feel like trustworthy and you're comfortable in sharing those. And first of all, after you share those, you will like already start feeling better about it. And second, they may be able to offer some other perspective that you may not have been aware before. So I would say those are the general things to like look out for beyond like obviously improving your skill set and understanding your business and see how you can like make an impact at your business.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's almost like I guess borrow the healthcare conversation we were having earlier. Everybody has a different genetic profile. Everybody also does have a different set of traits and characteristics that will make you better at certain things than other things. So a couple of things I think I would add to Mary's point is, one, figure out your career plan. When folks come to me about advice, always I recommend them to start there, is to have a deliberate kind of planning process. And it's actually real. If you think about us as a corporation, corporates always does annual plan, vision and mission, and goal, and they do these planning once a year or every quarter. We actually should leverage that thought process to do sort of manage us as a corporate. How would that look like? What are the ultimate goals? Which are the values, like as you said, Mary? What are the core values that you think is most important? What do you define as success? For folks like, at various times, like for me particularly, for example, when I was faced with tough choices, I did tilted my scale more towards family than career. I had a chance to, for example, move to Seattle for Amazon opportunities. I had opportunities to lead bigger teams, have bigger titles. I chose not to. So everybody has different definition. That's definitely important. And the other one is, when you have your mapping out, do your planning, you want to also think about what you love and what you loathe. And something I recommend is Marcus Buckingham's book about strengths-based management. And this is the thing that a lot of Silicon Valley companies really live by, is you don't have to, like my own early childhood education, we were told, make up your shortcomings so you become this 3 good student. This is a literal translation, 3好学生. You don't have to. You really should just think about your strength and really amplify and do the things you love and perfect the things that you like and enjoy doing. And the last thing I think is super important as sort of the Chinese working in corporate America is really make sure you communicate your impact through tangible projects. when we say communication, we say Asians suck at communication. It's not so much that we're not articulate. We all are articulate, but what I have noticed is sometimes we don't advance further is because we are so capable. We do so many things, but we are not anchoring ourselves to the most tangible project that we can associate our name on. And that, if you can, I would recommend you to really focus on one or two, not more than that, couple of projects of high impact. And preferably if you can be the one that drive those projects, that really also shows leadership. But this topic is really, really big. Mary and gentlemen, you guys, any thoughts you would like to offer?
The only thing I would add is be deliberate about the organization that you're joining. These sort of things can be like before you take a job, do your due diligence on the culture and the receptivity of that organization to women in product or engineering, right? I think I work for both sorts of organizations where it's been heavily biased towards males. 23andMe is the opposite. I think we have more women in product than men. And it's largely because we have, I think, a strong leadership team that emphasizes that. And those sort of things do make a difference in the end.
That makes a lot of sense. I think LinkedIn, if I'm not mistaken, LinkedIn is also considered as a really great place for professional women who have to balance work and life.
Right. Generally, like in all sorts of like voting, or like our former CEO Jeff Weiner, he has been kind of the top CEO, and like top CEO as voted by diverse group, top CEO as like voted by female employees for like consecutive years. Not to mention too much about him as an individual, but kind of the culture that he was able to create for LinkedIn as a leadership group was something that's really great. And that's also one of the reasons I joined.
Even Quibi, I believe it's also co-founded by Meg Whitman, who is also a serial female CEO, right?
Yes. And actually, I think our numbers are about half female to male ratio at the company as a whole. Obviously, as a tech group, our ratio is a little bit lower than that, but we do have a pretty healthy ratio, and we are receptive to female engineers in the group. I think good proportion of our leadership team, engineering leadership, are actually females. So kind of like what Tim is saying, look for the organization that actually promotes this kind of environment and this kind of culture, as opposed to those that are kind of fighting against it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and if just one thing I want to add is not really advice to women in tech, but really just more of a call out to our male allies. There's no reason you had to pick between the bigger title and family, and this is calling out to all male allies to contribute to family and taking up the responsibilities as well. I contribute a lot of whatever career success I've had, and to my family. And if it wasn't for my wife staying home and actually taking care of the kids, I definitely wouldn't have had the opportunity to do a lot of things that I did. But I think same can go both ways. And so this is more of a call out to our male allies to also to help make that happen as well, so that you don't have to choose between family or a bigger title.
Yeah, that's really important. It takes two to tango. There's a question, by the way, for Brian and Mary. The audience was curious if you could elaborate a little bit more about the LinkedIn ecosystem. Specifically, the question is, how does this well-rounded monetization model work for LinkedIn, and how does each BU support each other?
Right, like Brian, maybe I can start. Yeah, cool. So I'll start, say more up from the product side, right? So overall, LinkedIn's mission is to connect the world's professionals so that they can be productive and successful. So kind of the core part of the audience, or kind of if you imagine there are like multiple different marketplaces within LinkedIn, right? For instance, as LinkedIn sales solution. So sales folks can reach out or like target people they want to do a sales pitch to on LinkedIn on the other side. But kind of usually that bigger pool of audience is on the social network. It's on the LinkedIn.com or like in the LinkedIn application, which I guess like most of us are actually members too. And within this, like what we call this flagship product, the LinkedIn.com and LinkedIn app, the monetization sources are generally like on the premium side and on the advertisement side that are advertisement that are being displayed in the feed. And obviously, the more people start engaging on the feed, starting engaging on the website, generally you will have more views of ads, right? And also from there, you have the premium services for the members who can either be job seeking or that they want to reach out to others for mentorship so they can gain more email credits. And those are part of the premium offerings. So you can subscribe for premium as well. So those are the two major consumer facing monetization methods. And within the premium membership, you also start getting access to the LinkedIn Learning courses. And then a couple of other business units on the enterprise side is that we have LinkedIn Sales Solution, which is the enterprise product offering for salespeople. The LinkedIn Talent Solution, which is for recruiters. LinkedIn Learning also has an enterprise component, which is like selling to businesses as well. So for a lot of those marketplaces, because they're two-sided and they want to sell to professionals, right? So then the bigger the professional pool is, the more monthly active, daily active users we have, the more value we have in this ecosystem, and therefore there would be more recruiters wanting to like use our product as well. But of course, other than the audience pool that you can target, you can also we also offering like added value to say like the recruiters, to the salespeople, to give them like analytics and other sorts of tools, so there's more value in the things that they purchase. Passing the mic off to Brian.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I think that's actually that rounds up pretty good of what LinkedIn does. And only one thing I want to add is everything revolves around our flagship product. That's the LinkedIn app. And like, for example, the for LTS, which is our talent solutions, it's very much a two-sided marketplace where you have our members on the professional network, but we also have on the other side of the marketplace is the hirers. And so this is a two-sided marketplace where we bring people together so we can generate leads to professional hiring people to hire from our network.
Plus, I think I'll chime in as well as a increasingly more loyal LinkedIn user. I really appreciate LinkedIn's content. That's where I get a lot of the latest business news, as well as the type of content that's top of mind in the professional network of people that I actually respect or care about. The other thing that people have mentioned, something interesting, is Facebook took a different stance in terms of fact-checking Trump's tweets. And somehow, maybe it's the halo effect, but LinkedIn became the place where there are more folks more passionately talking about diversity, inclusion, in light of what has happened recently in the past couple of weeks. So I say kudos to LinkedIn. Please continue doing the great work. There's actually also a question, by the way, for Tim in terms of the management of the hardware side. And I don't know if that's an accurate question, but I will just kind of help to bring this question to you. One of the questions was, how do you do the same type of management on the hardware side of development? For example, 23andMe has physical, tangible products, such as the testing kit. It's time. I think I need to order your kit. I'm sold.
Yeah, in a nutshell, we do think the product team basically owns the entire end-to-end experience, right? So from the order of the kit to the actual receipt of the kit in the mail, including the sample collection tube, the submission of the saliva sample back to the lab, and the return of the results. And of course, product mostly focuses on what is that logged in experience once you've actually got your results back. And that's where we try to keep our customers as engaged as possible. We have an operations team that handles the kind of procurement of the sample saliva kit from our suppliers. And we also have a fulfillment center, actually a couple of fulfillment centers in the States as well as outside of the States that allow us to send it to other folks. But for sure, the product team actually does touch, and the marketing team also touches it. There's like, even just the packaging itself, there's some brand implications for that, right? So if we're trying to maintain the 23andMe brand, the packaging has to reflect that.
Has the COVID situation made the hardware harder to manage, or supply chain has changed in any way?
It has not, which is good news. Just a little bit more detail here. When you send your saliva sample in, it actually gets it actually gets tested on what we call a chip, an array, and so that's the medical device part of it. That part is actually regulated by the FDA as well. So technically, 23andMe is a medical device.
Mm. Yeah, I'm totally going to order this for, at least to figure out if mosquitoes bite me more next time, so I'm more prepared.
Right.
And then there's also, I know we're almost at time. Sometimes when the conversation is good, it's you just don't realize time has gone by. But there is a question, and I thought maybe it's useful for some of our other folks in the audience. The question was, for someone who is 3 to 4 years into their career, what would you advise? Is it better to focus on growing within the company, or is it better that they choose their career path by focusing on the type of skills over time?
I would say that always the skill side is always really important because they go together with you, right? And there are things that you can that are probably skills that are more like transferable. So generally, the advice is that if there are transferable skills, then those are the best ones to carry along, right? And as for quote unquote growing in the company, I think it's around promotion and impact. And obviously you have like the choices of growing within this company or grow somewhere else. And that is a decision really going to be based on like where you are, what do you see the potentials of the company, are you happy working there? So it's more of a complicated thing. And yeah, the skills part is always important. As for the growth or the promotional opportunities, like I would say definitely if you are making an impact, like try to communicate that impact. But sometimes the promotion may not come immediately. If you're like a new grad in the area for 1 or 2 years, it may be difficult. And even sometimes when it's like 3 to 4 years, for instance, a lot of people want to become a manager, right? Around like 3 to 4 years time frame, but the business may not have that kind of need. And then sometimes there is a tougher choice. Is that, okay, I built reputation over here. I'm fairly happy over here. Do I stay here or do I go somewhere else? And there are even people considering that, okay, do I transfer from like one like focus area into another one? Do I go from like engineering to data science to like product management, or do I go from like a product management to product marketing? So these are generally complicated and kind of goes back to, I think, the value of being able to speak to like professionals in this field. But transferable skills are definitely like the things you can carry along.
Yep.
Yeah, I would say that probably for me, the key is find out what you're passionate about. If you're working on something passionate, you're gonna learn, you're gonna grow, you're gonna develop skills. Another thing would be step out of your comfort as much as you want. I mean, it's really easy for someone to get into a groove and says, I know what I'm doing here, I'm gonna keep doing it because I'm good. But I think where you really start learning is like, I'm interested in this, I'm passionate about this, let me try to see where I can do with that. So it's a lot, for me, it's always about my curiosity, about my passion, what I want, like kind of what I mentioned. I joined Yahoo to do finance because I really wanted to work on the finance app, not because I'm going to Yahoo or not because I'm doing mobile engineering. I took an opportunity to manage the fantasy sports team. I mean, one, yes, it's the opportunity to grow my own skills, but really it's because I'm a fantasy sports player and I want to work on a product that I will want to use all the time. So it's things like that that I find myself just going into areas that I just have a personal connection to, that makes all of that just natural and easy flowing, rather than feel like I'm being forced to learn something because I think it will help my career. Your days, your weeks, your years go by so much smoother when you're just enjoying what you're doing. So I think that is the key for me, of just looking for your passion and go that direction. And so far it hasn't failed me.
I certainly echo that, and I would even venture to say that you should certainly try many different things in as early as possible in your career, because as you progress, I think the opportunity cost actually becomes higher and higher, right? A lot of people's actually having this problem that has come to me and talk about they've been in backend development or they've been in mobile development for a long time and they've gotten into a very senior position, but they actually want to try something else and they find it actually it's harder to get into another domain at that point because they're at a certain level. So it's actually much better to try everything out as early as possible in your career and really find something that you're passionate about. And I think growth is going to come very natural because it's not going to feel like work. And if you really enjoy what you're working on, and you're going to build the skill really easily.
Yeah, last point that echoes a lot of what's already been said is, engage in some self-reflection and self-awareness, right? Like, what is really, really important to you? Is it a VP title, or is it like being a CEO, or is it to acquire experience doing things that you actually love? Probably everybody on this panel could be an executive or a VP or a CEO, but doing something that you actually enjoy doing, working with people, learning new things. Learning is a massive thing for me. Like, if I stop learning, I'm out, right? If there's nothing in it for me in terms of growing my career and learning either functionally how to manage folks or domain wise, then I'm going to leave the company, right? So 23andMe, I've been actually at the company for 9 years now, and it's because I've continually pushed myself and created opportunities for myself to learn. Not all organizations will give you that opportunity, but in terms of navigating your career, if you're 3 to 4 years in, be very deliberate about, okay, what is really driving me here? Is it to do something that's like truly life-changing, game-changing for the world, or is it to level up in terms of title? I'm not saying that's not an issue. Like, so for some people, you can do both, right? But I would not pursue the title just for the sake of pursuing the title.
Yeah, super insightful feedback. I know, unfortunately, we're really, really at time. I wish we could keep going and have our beer in the hand. I actually don't like IPA, just for the record. I actually like Corona, for the record, with lime. I need to hand it back to Corinne, who will help us to conclude the session.
Thanks, Caroline. What an insightful talk we just had. Thank you again, William, Brian, Mary, Tim, and Caroline, for your perspectives and time for the community. SVLC is created and organized by IntelliPro Group. Founded in Silicon Valley in 2009, IntelliPro is one of the leading companies in North America of strategic management consulting and human resources solution. With the AI, big data, and SaaS technology, IntelliPro Group has established an enormous global database of high-end talents and become a global partner of many first-class technology companies. IntelliPro also offers other services such as executive searching, flexible staffing, RPO, corporate training, and overseas campus recruiting. Our gratitude also goes to Baidu Live for broadcasting this forum abroad. Although the pandemic is keeping us from meeting in person, the SVLC hunger for knowledge and passion for growth are getting us together in other means. Silicon Valley Leadership Community will continue to follow trending topics and organize leadership talks. Our next session will be held on June the 14th. Please scan the QR code on the screen, add SVLC Official as your WeChat friend, or join our LinkedIn community to keep up with our progress. Thank you all again for joining us today. See you at next SVLC forum.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you. Thank
Good night.
you. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.